Hello there, Steve Kaufman here again, talking about language learning. What else? I had a post on Krashen, Stephen Krashen, and talked a bit about it. He is the language learning expert who has made popular the idea that the most important thing in language learning is to have access to meaningful content. He is very much behind reading, extensive reading, silent reading. He suggests that children in class just be encouraged to read rather than having to listen to a teacher provide instruction to them. He also is in favor of listening. I posted on my blog reference to a website by Benico Mason, who is also has a number of research studies there which show that really reading by itself is more effective than reading and instruction. In other words, they took however many students and they gave them 150 hours of reading, I believe, and one group got an additional 150 hours of writing practice. And at the end of the period, those people who only had reading did just as well as those people who had the additional writing practice. And it goes on, and the gist is that really all you need to do is read and listen, but that the content should be always, obviously, of interest to you and constantly graded to your level, just a little bit more difficult, just a little bit difficult for you and not too difficult. So, I think that this is largely true, but I have some reservations. First of all, I think it's very important that what I'm reading, and I'm going to go based on my own experience as a language learner. I feel that the interest in the subject is a bigger factor than how difficult it is. So while it's nice to have something that is just at that next level of difficulty, it would take a long time to ramp up to really interesting content if I were constantly sort of reading and listening to things that are deliberately easy and graded readers and I don't know, children's stories and so forth. So yes, inevitably at the beginning to some extent you need content, largely content which has fewer words that you don't know. And of course that's why at Link we tell you how many unknown words there are for you in each bit of content, so that the more you use the system, the more accurate you can be in finding stuff that doesn't have too many new words. But it's impossible to have it so perfectly graduated. And I felt in learning Russian that I was very motivated to try some Tolstoy. And I didn't want to read silly little stories about my friend from Germany visited me in Leningrad and we visited this park and that park, and I had no interest in it, even though it had fewer unknown words. So, at least in my case, I'm prepared to take on content with more unknown words. And I do believe that a system like Link makes it possible to take on more difficult content. You can accelerate the process and get yourself to genuine content faster. So that is the first place where I disagree with Krashen and Benico Mason. And I happen to believe that Link provides a bridge that gets you from the easy content that you have to begin with up to authentic content, more unpredictable vocabulary. It gets you there faster. So that's the first place where I disagree. The second place where I disagree is that I know that when I write, if I'm writing in Portuguese and I spell something wrong and I see it, I também, was it T-A-N-M-B-E-M, or, it's not really clear. Does it have an accent? I can't remember. I look it up. Next time I read, I really notice that word. I notice it. So there is no question in my mind that some degree of output is beneficial. It helps you notice. You learn from your input, but writing or speaking helps you notice. I don't think you need to do a lot of it. The problem is that when you are starting out in the language, you can't speak very well. So it's stressful and it's no fun to talk a lot with people. It's the same with writing. You don't have to write a lot, but it just helps to kind of stimulate, massage your brain, and it starts to make you a little bit more observant. At least that's my own experience. So some degree of speaking and writing, I think, is useful. the other problem with speaking, especially with writing, is it takes long when you aren't very good at the language. Whereas listening, you can hear a lot of the language. You can be training the brain just almost passively, listening to lots and lots of the language. In an hour of listening, you get an hour of native speaker content thrown at you. If you spend an hour trying to write something, I mean, that's an hour you haven't spent listening. So some writing, some listening as a stimulus to the brain, but not too much of it. The other thing I would say about speaking is, in order to end up being genuinely fluent in the language, you do have to speak. You have to eventually be put in a situation where you have to speak a lot. So I feel now with my Russian that I have built up my capability over 3 years of lots of listening and reading, overwhelmingly listening and reading, a little bit of writing and speaking, once a week, twice a week, maybe. But in order to really become fluent in the language, I would like to be somewhere where for a month or two, I have to speak Russian every day. And so that being put in that situation, but only when you have the weapons to defend yourself, only after a lengthy period, largely through input, reading and listening, then to go out there and defend yourself, that's kind of where you finish off your ability. And it is true, as Krashen points out, that you can be surrounded by the language, and if it's too early, you can't take advantage of it, and you kind of close in, and you don't really notice anything. If you can ramp up through the input activities, then you can take advantage of that total immersion situation. So, I guess in summary, and I know there are some radical Krashenites out there, fundamentally, I think they are right, that the task of language learning and language teaching has been made totally unnecessarily complicated. And there are literally billions of dollars being spent on conventional language teaching, most of which is unnecessary. That if we could put that effort into finding ways to induce people to listen and read, and maybe you have to test them in some way, or at Link we measure the number of links created. We measure different ways to make sure that in fact they are reading and listening. You can even ask them questions, but don't give them too much writing. Just a little, enough to know that they've been reading, enough to jog the mind a little bit, to make the mind a little more observant, but mostly just let them read and listen. I think listening is more powerful than reading in terms of making the brain used to the language. I think the reading is necessary for vocabulary accumulation, again, particularly the way we do it at Link. So we could save a lot of time and money. We could have a lot more people fluent in different languages if people would try to understand what Krashen and Benico Mason have said, but still leaving a small role for vocabulary review, like the flashcards that we have at Link, and a small amount of talking and reading. And I should add, even though I constantly say I can't understand grammar explanations, as I've mentioned before, get the smallest grammar book you can find, or find some websites on the web, quickly review, if I were going to take, Czech or Finnish, roughly how is it structured? Read it, forget it. And then after a few months of listening and reading, have another flip through. And I think that also helps to make you more attentive and observant. So, I am a Krashenite, but with reservations. And most of those reservations, and most of the ways in which I think we can do a better job than just plain reading and listening, are in fact included in what we have built into Link. So again, I'm going to get roundly criticized by my friend Igor of Macedonia for sort of always promoting Link. But hey, that's my commitment. That's what I'm trying to do in order to help people learn more languages. And the vast majority of people who use Link use it free of charge. So, but there again, my views on Krashen. I look forward to the criticism. Bye for now.